The first thing I remember after giving birth wasn't holding my daughter. It was my suitcase sitting on the front porch, still zipped, still carrying the hospital bracelet I hadn't taken off yet. I was standing there with a newborn asleep against my chest, stitches pulling every time I shifted my weight, when my mother-in-law folded her arms and said, almost casually, "You're not coming back into this house." For a moment, I honestly thought she was joking. Then my husband looked down at the driveway instead of at me. That hurt more than the surgery. I waited for him to laugh, to tell his mother she'd gone too far, to pick up my bag. Instead, he quietly said, "Maybe it's best if you stay with your mom for a while." Those words landed with frightening precision, like someone removing a load-bearing beam from a house and pretending nothing would collapse. My daughter made a tiny sound in her sleep. I looked at her, then at him. 5 years together, 3 years married, 42 hours after bringing our baby into the world. And suddenly, I wasn't a wife anymore. I was an inconvenience. My father-in-law stood near the garage door. He never said a single word. He simply looked away. Silence can become an accomplice. I didn't cry. Not because I was strong, because I was too exhausted to understand what was happening. My hospital discharge papers were still folded inside my diaper bag. My medication was still sitting on the kitchen counter inside the house. Even my wedding picture was hanging in the hallway. Everything that belonged to me remained inside, except me. Then my mother-in-law smiled. Not a cruel smile, a satisfied one. The kind someone wears after checking the final box on a long list. She looked directly at my daughter, then back at me. "You aren't ready to be a mother." That sentence stayed with me longer than any scar. I wanted to ask what I'd done. I wanted someone to explain how becoming a mother had somehow made me homeless. Instead, a black sedan slowly pulled into the driveway. I didn't recognize it. Neither did anyone else. The driver stepped out first, then my mother. She wasn't crying. She wasn't yelling. She wasn't even walking quickly. She simply opened the back door. A man in a charcoal gray suit stepped out carrying a leather briefcase. He adjusted his glasses, looked once at the house, then at my husband, and quietly asked, "Is everyone present?" No one answered. He nodded anyway, opened the briefcase, and pulled out a thick folder. That was the moment everything changed. But no one standing on that driveway, not even me, understood why. Welcome back to Real Drama Story, where family secrets unfold and quiet decisions change everything. If you are new here, drop a comment and subscribe. Now, let's get into it. People often ask when a marriage starts falling apart. They imagine one giant fight, a dramatic betrayal, a single terrible decision. But houses don't collapse because of one cracked brick. They collapse because small cracks are ignored until the foundation finally gives way. Looking back now, I can see every crack. I just didn't know they mattered. I grew up in Columbus, Ohio. My father owned a small construction company. Nothing glamorous. Mostly residential remodeling. Bathrooms, roofs, kitchen additions. He used to tell me, "Every beautiful house hides thousands of decisions nobody notices." I never understood what he meant until years later. When I was 12, he handed me a tape measure. Not because he needed help, because he wanted me to learn patience. We spent Saturdays measuring walls that looked perfectly straight. They almost never were. "Your eyes lie," he'd say. "Numbers don't." Those words became part of me. Dad passed away when I was 19. Cancer. Fast. Merciless. After he died, Mom kept the company alive for another 3 years before selling it. Not because it failed, because she wanted peace more than profit. She always believed something simple. Money should protect your family. It should never replace one. I carried those lessons into adulthood. Then I met Ethan. He was funny without trying. The kind of man who remembered small things. My coffee order. My favorite movie. The anniversary of my father's death. He didn't try to impress me. He listened. After 2 years, he proposed beside a lake where we'd had our third date. It wasn't expensive. No violin. No photographers hiding in bushes. Just us. I said yes before he finished asking. The first year of marriage felt ordinary. In the best possible way. Saturday grocery trips. Movie nights. Burned pancakes. Arguments about laundry. Real life. Then his mother started visiting more often. Sandra. She never insulted me directly. She specialized in smaller things. Questions. Suggestions. Tiny corrections. You season chicken differently than Ethan likes. I folded those towels another way. I usually iron his work shirts. Every sentence sounded helpful. Together, they slowly erased me. If Ethan thanked me for dinner, she'd remind him she taught him his favorite recipes. If we bought furniture, she'd explain where she'd have placed it. If I painted the guest room, she'd mention the previous color looked warmer. Nothing serious. Nothing worth arguing over. That's how it worked. Tiny adjustments. Day after day. Until I wasn't making decisions anymore. I was asking permission without realizing it. Even Ethan changed. Not overnight. Slowly. Like wood absorbing moisture. At first he'd defend me. Later he'd stay quiet. Eventually, he'd agree with her before I'd finished speaking. The first time I noticed it, we were shopping for a crib. I'd spent weeks researching safety ratings. Different brands. Materials. Reviews. Sandra walked into the store. Looked around for maybe 30 seconds. Then pointed at another model. We bought this one for Ethan's cousin. He immediately nodded. Let's get that one. He never even asked why I'd chosen the first crib. It was only a crib. But it wasn't. It was another beam removed from the house we'd been building together. I should have recognized the pattern. Instead, I blamed pregnancy hormones. When I became pregnant, Sandra transformed. Friends called it excitement. I called it possession. She insisted on attending doctor's appointments. She wanted a key to our house for emergencies. She reorganized the nursery while I was at work. One afternoon, I came home and found every drawer rearranged, every blanket replaced. Even the baby's name sign had disappeared. We thought this looks classier, she said. We. Not she. We. Somehow everyone had voted except me. I smiled anyway. I kept telling myself families needed compromise. That motherhood would soften everyone. That once the baby arrived, we'd finally feel like one family. I was wrong. Because while I was preparing to become a mother, someone else was quietly preparing to replace me. And I wouldn't understand how carefully that plan had been built until the day I found my suitcase waiting on the porch. The strange thing about betrayal is that it rarely announces itself. It doesn't knock. It doesn't shout. It simply rearranges your life while convincing you that everything is normal. By the time you notice, the furniture has already been moved. Looking back, there were moments that should have stopped me in my tracks. At the time, they felt too small to question. Now they read like warning labels. About 4 months before my daughter, Lily, was born, Ethan came home unusually cheerful. I've got something that'll make life easier, he said. He placed a stack of papers on the kitchen island. Mom thinks we should put both houses under one family management plan. I looked up from the tiny baby socks I had been folding. What houses? Our place and my parents' place. I laughed. We only own one house. He smiled. Technically. That word bothered me. Technically. He explained that his parents wanted to refinance their mortgage, and their financial advisor had suggested combining certain family assets into one management agreement. It'll lower taxes, he said. It'll simplify everything. I skimmed the first page. It looked official. Legal terms. Paragraphs. Boxes for signatures. I wasn't a lawyer. I wasn't even thinking about paperwork. I was 36 weeks pregnant. My ankles were swollen. I hadn't slept through the night in months. I handed the papers back. I'd like to read everything first. For just a second, Ethan's smile disappeared. Only for a second. Then it returned. Of course. The documents vanished into his office. Oddly enough, they never came back. 3 weeks later, Sandra invited me to lunch. Just the two of us. That had never happened before. She ordered my favorite soup before I even arrived. It felt almost kind. Halfway through the meal, she leaned forward. You know, she said softly, marriage changes after babies. I smiled. I've heard. She stirred her tea without drinking it. Women lose themselves. I waited. They become mothers instead of wives. Still, I said nothing. Then she looked directly at me. If that happens, Ethan will need stability. Something about the way she said stability made me uncomfortable, as though she wasn't talking about emotions. She was talking about ownership. I brushed the feeling aside. Pregnancy had made me emotional, or so I kept telling myself. Labor began on a rainy Thursday morning. Everything happened quickly after that. Hospital lights, machines, doctors, 12 exhausting hours. Then, Lily, 6 pounds, 11 ounces, dark hair, tiny fingers wrapped around mine with surprising strength. Every fear I'd carried disappeared the second I saw her. Nothing else mattered. Not work, not arguments, not Sandra, not even the house. Just her. Ethan cried. I'd never seen him cry before. He kissed my forehead. I promise, he whispered. I'll always protect you both. I believed him. That's the heartbreaking part. I truly believed him. The second day at the hospital, Sandra visited. She brought flowers. Pink lilies. Ironically, she barely looked at the baby. Instead, she kept asking the nurses strange questions. When is discharge? Who signs the paperwork? Will she need help walking? It felt less like concern, more like logistics. At one point, she stepped into the hallway with Ethan. Their conversation lasted almost 20 minutes. When they returned, both of them smiled too quickly. I asked what they'd been discussing. Insurance, Ethan answered. Nothing more. The morning we were discharged, Ethan insisted on driving separately. He said he'd forgotten something at home. Sandra offered to take me and Lily. I declined. Something inside me finally whispered, no. I wanted my husband with us. He looked irritated, only briefly. Then he agreed. The drive home was strangely quiet. He answered every question with one-word responses. The closer we got to the neighborhood, the tighter his grip became on the steering wheel. Then, he turned onto our street. I saw my suitcase before he parked. 2 of them. One large, one small. Beside them sat a diaper bag. Mine. The front door remained closed. The curtains moved slightly. Someone was watching. I remember asking one question. What is this? No one answered. You already know what happened next. Sandra stepped outside. She called me useless. She told me motherhood had exposed what kind of wife I'd always been. She claimed I wasn't emotionally stable, that I needed time away, that Ethan deserved peace. Every sentence sounded rehearsed, like she'd practiced in front of a mirror. Ethan never interrupted. He simply stood there, watching, as though someone else were speaking through him. Then my mother arrived, alongside attorney Daniel Harper. The leather folder in his hands suddenly became the center of everyone's attention. Sandra frowned. I'm sorry, she said sharply. This is a family matter. Daniel smiled politely. It certainly is. He opened the folder. Mrs. Collins. He looked at Sandra. Before anyone says another word, I'd like to clarify who legally owns this property. The entire driveway became silent. Sandra laughed. We own it. Daniel didn't respond immediately. He removed another document, dated April 18th, 3 years earlier. Signed, stamped, recorded with the county. He handed a copy to Ethan, another to Sandra, then another to me. I stared at the first page. I had never seen it before. My name appeared near the top. So did my late father's company. Then Daniel calmly explained something I had never known. 3 months before our wedding, my mother had insisted on protecting my inheritance from Dad. Instead of giving me cash after selling the construction company, she had quietly placed nearly $420,000 into a family real estate trust. That trust had purchased our home. Not Ethan, not his parents, the trust. And according to one clause, no beneficiary could be removed from the residence without written authorization from both the trustee and the beneficiary. I was both. Sandra blinked twice. I don't understand. Daniel nodded. I know. She looked toward Ethan. He looked terrified. You told me, she whispered. He couldn't finish the sentence she'd started. Daniel continued calmly. The mortgage payments were handled automatically through the trust account. The taxes were paid through the trust. The maintenance reserve was funded through the trust. He paused. So while Mr. Collins contributed to household expenses, he gently closed the folder. He never owned this property. Nobody spoke. The only sound came from Lily waking in my arms. Sandra's face turned pale. She pointed toward me. No. She looked back at Daniel. There must be another document. There is, Daniel replied. And we'll discuss that one shortly. That sentence changed the atmosphere completely. Because if there was another document, what else had my parents planned? What had they seen years ago that I hadn't? If this story is hitting close, drop a comment and stay with me, because what happens next is something none of them were ready for. Daniel closed the folder and looked toward my mother. She had remained silent from the moment she arrived. Finally, she stepped forward. She reached into her purse. Not for tissues. Not for her phone. For a small brass key attached to an old wooden keychain. I recognized it instantly. My father's workshop key. The one he carried every single day. She placed it gently in my hand. Then she whispered, "Your dad always said foundations matter more than paint." I looked at the key, then at the people standing in front of me. For the first time that day, I realized my father might still have one final blueprint waiting to be uncovered. I closed my fingers around my father's old workshop key. The edges were worn smooth from years of use. It wasn't worth much, maybe a few dollars. But in that moment, it felt heavier than the leather briefcase Daniel carried, because my father had never kept useless things. If he'd saved a key, it opened something important. Daniel looked at me. "I think it's time." I nodded. Sandra crossed her arms. "I don't know what kind of game this is." "It isn't a game," Daniel replied. "It's paperwork." There was something reassuring about the way he spoke. He never raised his voice. He never argued. He simply moved from one document to the next, as if laying bricks in a straight line. People often underestimate calm, until it starts dismantling lies. Daniel opened the second folder. "There are two matters here," he said. "The property, and what happened this morning." Sandra rolled her eyes. "Oh, please." Daniel ignored her. He placed 3 printed photographs on the hood of Ethan's car. One showed my packed suitcase by the front door. Another showed the nursery after my belongings had been removed. The third showed the timestamp from our home's security camera. 8:17 a.m. My mother looked surprised. "I didn't know you had cameras." "I didn't," I said quietly. Daniel smiled. "Your father did." Everyone turned toward him. When the house was purchased through the trust, he included a modern security system in the renovation budget. It automatically stored footage in a remote archive. Sandra's confidence faded. "You can't be serious." "I usually am." He pressed a button on a tablet. A video began to play. There was no sound at first, only pictures. Sandra entering the house. 2 movers carrying my suitcases downstairs. My baby clothes being placed into boxes. The nursery door closing. Then, the audio started. Sandra's voice was perfectly clear. "Put all of her things outside. She won't be staying here." My heart didn't race. It slowed. Sometimes certainty is quieter than fear. Ethan stared at the screen. I didn't know she packed everything." Sandra turned sharply. "Don't do that." "Mom, don't you dare pretend this was only my decision." That sentence hung in the air. Daniel quietly paused the video. "So it wasn't." No one answered. Then Ethan did something I hadn't expected. He sat down on the curb, like all the strength had left his body. "I thought," he whispered. "I thought she was just going to stay with her mother for a week." Sandra looked horrified. "Ethan, you told me she'd agreed." "I said she needed space." "You said she wanted space." The difference was only one word, but one word can change the entire structure of a sentence and an entire marriage. My father-in-law, Richard, finally spoke. It was the first time anyone had heard his voice that morning. "That's enough." Everyone looked at him. He walked slowly toward me. His shoulders looked older than they had the week before. "I'm sorry." 2 simple words. No excuses. No explanations. Just truth. He looked at Ethan. "You failed your wife." And then he looked at Sandra. "And you mistook control for love." Sandra's face crumpled. "You've always taken her side." Richard shook his head. "No. I took the side of the person standing outside with a newborn." Silence. The kind that forces everyone to hear themselves. Daniel checked his watch. "There's one final matter." He handed me another envelope, still sealed. Across the front, in my father's handwriting, were 6 words. Open only if absolutely necessary. My hands trembled. I hadn't seen his handwriting in years. I carefully opened it. Inside was a single letter. My sweet Emma, if you're reading this, something has gone wrong. I hope I'm wrong about that. When people build houses, they spend months choosing paint colors and countertops. Very few ask about the foundation. Life is the same. I don't know who will disappoint you. Maybe no one. I pray that's true. But if someone ever mistakes your kindness for weakness, remember this. Kindness isn't surrender. Your mother and I created the trust because love should never require you to beg for safety. If the day comes when you need this letter, don't fight to stay where you aren't respected. Build somewhere stronger. Love, Dad. I read it twice, then folded it carefully. I slipped it into Lily's diaper bag. One day, she'd read it too. Sandra wiped her eyes. This has all gotten out of hand. Daniel raised an eyebrow. It certainly has. She stepped toward me. I'm sorry. It sounded rehearsed. I'm exhausted, she continued. The baby has been stressful for everyone. I said nothing. She tried again. We're family. Still nothing. Then she began to cry. Real tears. Or convincing ones. I only wanted what was best for Ethan. Before I could answer, Richard spoke. No, you wanted what was best for yourself. She looked at him in disbelief. We've been married 34 years. And today, he replied quietly, I finally understand why our son stopped making his own decisions. No one interrupted him. I should have stopped this years ago. He wasn't talking to Sandra anymore. He was talking to himself. Daniel cleared his throat. The trust board met by emergency vote this afternoon. I blinked. There was a meeting? Yes. He smiled slightly. Your mother anticipated we'd need one. He handed me the resolution. Effective immediately. The locks would be changed that evening. Only I and the trustee would have access. Any attempt to remove me from the property would be considered unlawful interference. The trust would also establish a $150,000 education fund for Lily, protected until her 25th birthday. Legal fees would be paid entirely by the trust. Sandra's shoulders slumped. She finally understood. She had spent years trying to take control of a house she had never owned. Ethan walked toward me slowly. I made the biggest mistake of my life. I looked at him. I know. I'm sorry. I know. I love you. Those words once would have fixed everything. Not anymore. Love without courage becomes decoration. Pretty, but unable to support weight. I hope you become the father Lily deserves. His eyes filled with tears. What about us? I looked down at my daughter. She stretched one tiny hand into the air. She had no idea adults could make life so complicated. I don't know. It was the only honest answer I had. 3 months later, I moved back into the house. Not because I had one, because it was my daughter's home. The nursery looked different. I repainted it myself. Soft sage green, the color I'd originally chosen. I rebuilt every shelf Sandra had rearranged, one measurement at a time, exactly the way Dad taught me. Straight, careful, patient. Richard visited every Sunday, never empty-handed, usually with coffee and blueberry muffins. He never asked for forgiveness. He simply kept showing up. Sometimes consistency says more than apologies. Ethan and I separated legally 6 months after that day. The divorce took another 8 months. It wasn't dramatic. No screaming. No courtroom theatrics. Just signatures, paperwork, and acceptance. He attended every custody exchange on time. He never missed child support. He became a dependable father. Just no longer my husband. People can grow. Sometimes they simply grow too late. Sandra sent 3 letters over the following year. I read every one. I answered none. Forgiveness doesn't always require reconciliation. Sometimes it only requires letting go of the anger. I did that for myself, not for her. On Lily's first birthday, my mother gave me a small wooden box. Inside lay my father's old tape measure, the same one he'd handed me when I was 12. It still worked perfectly. I smiled. Some tools never stop being useful, especially the ones that teach you how to recognize solid foundations. I placed it on the bookshelf beside his letter, not as a reminder of betrayal, as a reminder of survival. Because homes are never defined by walls. They're defined by the people who make them safe. And this time, that decision belonged to me. Respect is the foundation of every family. Without it, even the strongest house is only waiting for the first crack. If this story reminded you to know your worth, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe, drop a comment, and I will see you in the next one.